Greetings, dear viewers, this is Anime Octopus, bringing you another thought-provoking fanfiction discussion. Today's topic, what if Sasuke made Naruko pregnant? Part 6. Disclaimer, the content presented on this channel is solely for entertainment and discussion purposes. I do not claim ownership of any anime footage featured in my videos. All rights and credits belong to their respective creators and copyright holders. Let's dive into the narrative. Sasuke's eyes widened in shock as Itachi appeared behind Naruto, who had turned at the sound of him calling her name. His gaze was fixed on Itachi's red eyes, the Mangekyo Sharingan swirling as his brother's blade flashed, sending a spray of blood into the air. Naruto collapsed to the ground, and Sasuke couldn't suppress the anguished cry that escaped him. "Foolish little brother," Itachi's voice was cold, his eyes flashing with an eerie light. Sasuke, in a daze, found himself falling over Naruto, instinctively shielding her, much like he had once tried to protect his parents. His worst nightmares had come to life. Sasuke tightly gripped his chokudo, never drawing it from his side as he waited. The plan had been meticulously crafted by him and his wife, a fact that still felt surreal, even months into their marriage, long before Menma was born. Timing was crucial. The poison Naruto had developed needed to be handled with extreme caution. She had perfected a concoction that would be fatal to Orochimaru, a venom from which even Kabuto could not recover. This poison was a blend of the most lethal plants, venoms, and a paralysis agent. It was designed to paralyze not only the body but also the tenketsu, making it nearly impossible to use chakra for a limited time. Naruto had devised this formula as a side project amidst her extensive training over the past few years. Most of the ingredients were rare plants from Uzu no Kuni, making it a concoction that even Kusagaku would envy. It was a slow-acting toxin, intended to render its victim helpless before delivering a painful death over 3 days. Naruto had been reluctant when Sasuke suggested they test it on a rogue ninja who had attacked them during one of their missions. Yet, they knew it was a necessary evil, any mistake could be fatal. Even with Sasuke's formidable power, he understood that Orochimaru had not survived this long, nor become a Sannin, without formidable strength of his own. With Kabuto at his side, Orochimaru was an even greater threat. Sasuke was well aware of Kabuto's capabilities, recognizing that given time, he could become as dangerous, if not more so, than Orochimaru. It was imperative to eliminate them both, leaving no loose ends. As for Otogakur, it was of no concern to him. His focus was on completing the mission and returning home to his family. "You're up to something," came a voice, causing Sasuke to narrow his eyes. He glanced sideways and mentally sighed as the teenager approached him, with an odd complexion and a slightly feminine appearance. "Suigetsu," Sasuke acknowledged, regretting his decision to free the boy nearly a year ago. "Stay out of this. Or I'll kill you." Suigetsu snorted. "Maybe, but I'm in. Those two won't get away with experimenting on me. I'll cut them to pieces." Sasuke sighed, shaking his head. "Just don't get in my way," he replied, before heading down the hallway toward Orochimaru's chamber, where Kabuto would undoubtedly be as well. By now, Orochimaru and Kabuto would both be feeling the effects of the poison. "What is happening to me, Kabuto?" Orochimaru demanded, his voice strained as he lay weakly in bed. Kabuto, though visibly affected, appeared in slightly better condition than Orochimaru as he attended to his master's side. "I'm not entirely certain," Kabuto admitted. "It appears to be some form of toxin, but I have never encountered anything like this before." Orochimaru's eyes narrowed in suspicion. He had initially assumed that his deteriorating condition was due to the imminent need to transfer into a new host, as he was pushing the limits of the body he had taken 3 years prior. "Can you treat it?" Kabuto's hands trembled, not from fear, but due to his body's struggle against the same toxin that afflicted Orochimaru. It was hampering his ability to mold chakra, making it clear that the poison was more insidious than he initially realized. "No, not at the moment." "Very well, bring me Sasuke-kun." Orochimaru's command was cut short as the door creaked open, revealing the raven-haired youth, his expression as stoic as ever. There is no need, I am already here, Sasuke stated calmly. Orochimaru forced a grin, painfully lifting his hands. Ah, Sasuke-kun. It is time. However, he grunted in frustration when his chakra failed to respond as expected, causing Sasuke to smirk and chuckle darkly. Experiencing difficulty? Sasuke taunted. I'll be sure to express my gratitude when I return, the poison is more effective than we had anticipated. Orochimaru's eyes widened slightly. You? Sasuke's smirk widened as he nodded. Indeed. Kabuto's face twisted in anger. I knew you could not be trusted. Now, you will pay the price. Gathering all the chakra he could muster, Kabuto lunged at Sasuke, but the poison had already slowed his movements. Sasuke vanished in an instant, and Kabuto gasped as a blade pierced his chest. Ah, you started without me, Suigetsu complained as he entered the room, a menacing grin on his face, brandishing a sword. Does that mean I get to deal with Snake Face? Sasuke raised an eyebrow, pondering where Suigetsu's fear of Orochimaru had vanished. Since his release, Suigetsu had kept his distance from the Sannin, ensuring he was always at the opposite end of any room they shared, his wary gaze never straying far from Orochimaru. Sasuke attributed this newfound boldness to the belief that Orochimaru wouldn't pose a significant threat, given his current weakened state. Nevertheless, Sasuke took no chances, he had used every bit of the poison he had on hand, most of which was subtly administered into Orochimaru's food and drink. The poison's traceless nature made it particularly effective, as it could only be detected if specifically searched for. Finish Kabuto. His regenerative abilities won't be enough to save him, make sure there's nothing left, Sasuke ordered, kicking the medic nin off his chokudo before turning to face Orochimaru, who had somehow managed to rise from his bed. Suppressing the urge to roll his eyes, Sasuke launched a fire jutsu at Orochimaru, initiating the battle, a conflict that was decidedly one-sided, as both Kabuto and Orochimaru were severely weakened. 2 days later. Kata Hagakure no Sato. Naruto smiled as she watched the twins play on the playground, seated on one of the benches in the park, with Menma nestled comfortably in her arms. She reflected on her own childhood, recalling the many times she played alone in this very playground. Those solitary days persisted until she finally formed a friendship with Sasuke, although, not long after, she found herself alone once more, except for her attempts to coax Sasuke out of his aloofness and revive their bond. She was grateful that her children did not seem to face the same challenges. Although they were initially shy, Kyoshi more so than Naruko, they soon found playmates with ease. However, Naruto noticed some adults casting sidelong glances and subtly steering their children away from Kyoshi and Naruko. It irritated Naruto to see others projecting their judgments of her onto her children. She observed how they scrutinized the whisker marks Kyo-chan and Nari-chan had inherited from her, as if such traits were a mark of condemnation. Fortunately, there was no overt scorn or hostility, unlike what she had endured as a child. Naruto knew she wouldn't tolerate any mistreatment directed at her children. She might have endured the mob's hatred and scorn when she was young, but she would not allow such behavior to be directed at her offspring. Whether civilian or shinobi, anyone who tried to harm them would regret it. They would quickly learn not to provoke a protective mother, especially one with the ferocity of a fox, a metaphor she found fitting, given how others perceived her as the Kyuubi's vessel. Kaken! Naruko called out, hopping onto one of the swings beside Kyoshi. Naruto chuckled softly. Looking down at Menma, she stood up, carefully tucking him into the sling across her chest, and walked over to stand behind the twins. Let me guess, you need a push? She asked, amused by the grins the raven-haired children flashed her. Only one push, though, I don't want to wake your brother. The two pouted slightly, although she was sure they would deny it, their father's pride evident in their demeanor. Naruto sighed and shook her head, but she was glad to see them so happy. She gave them each a firm push, taking care not to disturb Menma. You're a good mother, Shizune said, coming up beside Naruto. Still with one hand supporting Menma and his sling across her chest, the blonde turned to look at the Hokage's first apprentice. Shizune, Naruto said. Did Ba-chan send you? Shizune smiled. She's called together the council, Shizune said. It's time. Naruto released a deep breath, settling her nerves as she nodded. She knew this was coming, and Tsunade had stalled as long as she could, a total of nearly 3 weeks, but it still became more real now that it was time to confront the council. She didn't have anything to fear from them, she could handle herself, but it didn't mean she wasn't slightly nervous about the whole ordeal. After all, a majority saw her as a demon, she knew she could at least trust the Shinobi Council somewhat. The clan heads had never openly discriminated against her, understanding the clear distinction between the jailer and the entity sealed within. And my children? She inquired. Shizune offered an apologetic glance. I'm sorry, Naru, but Tsunade believes it would be best if they accompany you as well, she replied. Naruto frowned, uncertain of her feelings on the matter. Uchiha Dono, a soft voice called out. Naruto turned at the sound, smiling faintly at the man who approached. He was dressed in a black high-collared shirt beneath a cream-colored trench coat, paired with dark pants resembling the standard Jonin uniform. A sash, reminiscent of the Fire Guardian's waist sashes, was wrapped around his left arm. However, unlike the Fire Guardian's fabric, this one was a dark orange, with a circle in the center featuring an Uchiha fan and an Uzumaki swirl intertwined in light blue fabric. The most prominent feature was the kanji for whirlpool in the center, along with the clan symbols. These guardians served a purpose similar to the 12 Fire Guardians, tasked with protecting her and her family. As the daimyo of Uzu no Kuni, though few knew the identity of the daimyo of the newly rebuilt Uzu no Kuni, she was bound to attract dangerous attention. Uzu no Kuni was still under reconstruction, with significant damage remaining. Although much had been restored, some work still needed to be done before it would be fully habitable. Refer to me as Uzumaki in public, Memoru, Naruto instructed. Though I have asked you to call me Naruto, haven't I? You have, Narudono, another voice chimed in from behind the red-haired man. Akiko, Naruto greeted warmly. Akiko was a petite woman with a youthful appearance, looking no older than 20. She wore attire similar to that of Amiko, though her hakama pants were black rather than red. Her long, slightly wavy hair was a deep shade of purple. Around her mid-thigh, she wore the same orange sash as Memoru, a mark all the Nanatsu Uzugati Enzu, the 7 Whirlpool Guardians, bore. They were the elite warriors of Whirlpool, ninja, samurai, and monks or Miko alike. Comparable to the 7 swordsmen of the mist or the Kinkaku force of Kumagakure, their role was not only to protect the daimyo but also to safeguard Whirlpool as a whole. Where is Masahiro? Naruto inquired. Though she had initially resisted the idea of having guards, Sasuke had convinced her to consider the numerous dangers they would face once Uzu no Kuni was fully restored and people began to return. It had taken considerable time and deliberation for Naruto to decide to reopen Uzu no Kuni and Uzushio-gakure to more than just the remnants of the Uzumaki clan, which was scant. Aside from herself, the only others she knew of were distant relatives. Mamoru was one such relative. He had been adopted by the Yukimura clan, but his grandfather had been an Uzumaki refugee who had settled in a village within Mizu no Kuni. Before his adoption, his name had been Ishikawa, his father's name, but his mother had shared some knowledge of his Uzumaki heritage. Unfortunately, his parents had been casualties of Kiri's civil war, despite living in a village far from Kirigakure. He had been discovered by the Yukimura clan near the water temple. Masahiro was his older, adopted brother. Akiko, on the other hand, had been recommended by the Fire Daimyo, who had initially considered her for his Fire Guardians but ultimately chose a more experienced candidate. He believed she would be a suitable choice, especially since several years had passed since he had passed her over, and she had undergone additional training. Akiko was raised at the Fire Temple, one of the Miko shrines, though she had always been more of a warrior compared to the other shrine maidens. Naruto quickly accepted her as one of her guardians, and, like all his guardians, they had to be prepared to leave their birthplaces for Uzu no Kuni. This transition was not as challenging as it seemed, as there were several traveling ninja with no previous village affiliation, or they had severed ties with their former villages. Becoming citizens of Uzu no Kuni and affiliating with Uzushiogakure once it became habitable would, in a sense, remove the bounty on their heads as missing nin. Although it was possible that their former villages might still list them in their bingo books, they would no longer be considered missing nin. Currently, there were only 3 members, Mamoru, Masahiro, and Akiko. The primary motivation for forming the Nanatsu Uzu Guardians was to provide additional protection for the children. "He's around, you know how Hiro is," Akiko remarked with a shrug. "He doesn't particularly enjoy being out in the open." Naruto nodded. "Shizune, these are 2 of my ninja." "I suppose," Naruto said, trying to find the appropriate words to explain to the slightly perplexed and cautious Shizune. "We're her guardians, like the fire daimyo has the 12 fire guardians," Akiko assisted, smiling cheerfully. "Except we also protect Uzu no Kuni itself, not just the Uchiha Uzumaki clan." Naruto nodded, chuckling slightly at the other girl. Akiko had a bubbly personality at most times, very cheerful and outgoing, but in a fight she did a complete 180. Becoming focused and a force to be reckoned with. She had been trained well, though she was mostly a hand-to-hand and weapons specialist. She did know some ninjutsu, but mostly her knowledge was of medical ninjutsu. As for the Uchiha Uzumaki part of her statement, it was simply how some called them. Despite the fact all her children had the Uchiha name and she herself had taken the Uchiha name when she and Sasuke married. As stated before, Naruto had taken her husband's clan name, even if her own clan was just as old and important. The Uzumaki, that is, the Namikaze, wasn't quite as old, but still rather prominent. Naruto knew Sasuke's dream, or one of them, was to rebuild his clan, and had happily taken his name as her own, fully intending to leave her clan name in the past. To her surprise, he'd said it would be alright if she wanted to give one of their children, if they had any more, the Uzumaki name to continue the clan. Naruto wasn't too sure about it. She was somewhat hesitant to let the Uzumaki clan die with her, but she also didn't have the same attachments that clan children who grew up in their clan did. She supposed that decision would wait, because she had no intentions of having more children for a long while, especially since she was sure things with Akatsuki were going to get worse before they got better. "Oh," Shizune said. "I didn't think you won for bodyguards, Naru." Naruto snorted. "It wasn't for me. I created the Nanatsu Uzu Gadianzu, though it's just the 3 of them right now," Naruto said. "I just happen to have a very protective and persuasive husband. It's not really for my sake either, they also act as Uzu no Kuni's protectors, along with myself as daimyo. They know I can take care of myself in most situations, they're mostly here for the children." "I see. Anyways, we should get going. We don't want to leave Tsunade and the council waiting long," Shizune said, and Naruto nodded, called the children to her, and they headed towards the council meeting. Akiko and Mamoru following behind at a bit of distance. Masahiro at an unknown location, followed after them as well, but completely unseen. Not for the first time in history the council was in complete silence and shock, staring at the people in front of them. More so the returned Jinchuriki of the Kyubi no Yoko and the 3 small children she had returned with. 2 of which looked about 3 or 4 at the most. There was also a baby in her arms, settled in a baby sling across her chest, who couldn't be much older than a few months or weeks. She had changed in the nearly 4 years she'd been gone. Her hair was longer and tied in 9 tight French braids. Tsunade and others couldn't help but wonder if she'd done that to make a statement, but with bangs framing her face as always, one side held back by 2 black clips, which was something she'd always kept constant about her changing hairstyles. Her clothing style was also different, and she'd definitely grown up from the Jinan she once was. She wore a high-collared, sleeveless, dark blue crop top, which stopped about her ribcage, and a black mesh armor shirt which had elbow-length sleeves and stopped an inch above her navel, leaving a bit of her midriff bare. Orange fingerless gloves with metal plates on the back. She also wore a dark orange open front apron skirt which also had slits up the side, and short black shorts under it. Black shinobi boots, and 2 forehead protectors. One was around her forehead as usual with the leaf symbol and black cloth, and the other was around her neck with a dark violet blue cloth with the Uzushio symbol, Tsunade recognized the outfit from when Naruto had returned to the village weeks ago, and figured it was her new standard ninja outfit. All ninja had one outfit they always won, but multiple copies since it was impossible to just have one set and always have it washed in time. Overall they nearly didn't recognize her, if it wasn't for the whisker marks, and fact very few people in the village had that shade of blonde hair or blue eyes. What caused many to break into words of outrage and shock was the news given to them by Tsunade, and the proof standing in front of them. It was hard not to realize who the children's father was. They looked too much like their parents to not realize. There was also the fact Naruto wore her Uchiha fan pendant and rings in plain sight for all to see. She'd pulled them into view just before entering the room 6 minutes before. Adding insult to injury, as far as the council went, was the fact Tsunade had also dropped her heritage on them at the same time. Only the elders and some of the shinobi council didn't seem that surprised, but they were looking slightly panicked. Silence! Tsunade finally shouted, having enough of the shouting and noticing how the twins shifted closer to Naruto and Menma stirred unhappily in his mother's arms. That is enough. As the council finally settled, Naruto couldn't suppress the slight smirk that broke through her composed exterior in response to the glares directed her way, primarily from the civilian faction of the council. How can we be certain she is the daughter of our esteemed hero, the Yondaime? One of the councilmen questioned, his tone laced with skepticism. Or that she is truly Uzumaki Kushina's child, much less the mother of these children? She could be deceiving us. Another councilman nodded in agreement. Indeed, Kitsune are renowned for their magic and trickery. Naruto narrowed her eyes slightly but maintained her composure. I can assure you she is exactly who I claim, Tsunade interjected firmly, presenting a stack of documents. Here are the proofs, birth certificates, Minato and Kushina's marriage license, and blood test results conducted by the Sandaime, and most recently by myself. Additionally, here are the documents verifying Naruto's children's births and her marriage to Uchiha Sasuke. The council members scrutinized the papers for what felt like an eternity, with the civilian members growing increasingly pale as time passed. I see, Hyuga Hyashi finally spoke, reclining slightly in his chair. Welcome home, Lady Uchiha. We cannot simply accept this. One of the council members shouted, his voice tinged with desperation. She must have used some sort of malevolent charm to seduce the last Uchiha. A few, either bold or foolish enough, voiced their agreement with the man's assertion. And what of those children? An older woman with stark pink hair, brighter than even Sakura's, and deep wrinkles exclaimed. They bear the same markings as the demon. They must be demons themselves, no human possesses such marks. Naruto observed the woman's shrill tone, which grated on the ears even more than Sakura's on her worst days. She felt Akiko and Mamoru emerge from the shadows, a move that startled the civilian side, though the others appeared to be aware that Naruto had entered with more than just Shizune and Tsunade. Uchiha Dono? Mamoru addressed her, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Are you all right? Mama? The twins' small voices chimed in, clinging to her side. They had never before encountered such cruel words directed toward their mother, or indirectly toward them. Mamoru, Akiko, take the children, Naruto ordered, her voice and expression eerily calm. Mamoru and Akiko nodded in acknowledgement. Akiko gently took Menma, who was sniffling, on the verge of tears, while Mamoru took one of the twins' hands. They're in trouble now, Okasan is upset, Nariko muttered softly, though it was unclear whether she was speaking to her guard or to Kiyoshi. Regardless, everyone in the room heard her. Kiyoshi chuckled and, along with Nariko, turned to smirk at the council. Both displayed the unmistakable look of a Uchiha who held knowledge that others did not, a sight that rarely boded well. They're going to regret this, the boy, who bore a striking resemblance to a younger Sasuke, remarked as they exited the room. Some of the council members couldn't suppress the small shiver that ran down their spines. The tension only escalated when Naruto's eyes briefly flashed red. I do not appreciate my children being referred to as demons, she stated, her gaze sweeping across the room, lingering on those who had spoken out, especially the pink-haired woman. I would advise you to choose your words carefully, lest you find yourself unable to speak at all. Why should I? The woman began, her tone still defiant, but the blonde's cold glare quickly silenced her. You may say whatever you wish about me, but if you involve my children, I will end you, Naruto warned, her voice leaving no room for doubt. Everyone present could sense the sincerity in her words. In that moment, she was reminiscent of Minato. When he was angered, he did not shout or scream, but his quiet resolve often made others wish he had. And if he promised retribution in that measured tone, he always meant it. He hadn't been quite as scary, but Naruto was also her mother's daughter, and the red-hot habanero wasn't someone to mess with. Her temper made Tsunade look tame in comparison. My apologies, for Haruno-san's words, Koharu said, trying to defuse the situation. Of course we accept what has been said here, after all the paperwork is in order and authentic. There is also no denying your children's appearances. There were numerous nods, particularly from the more apprehensive members of the civilian council who recognized their defeat. Some appeared ashamed, while others silently seethed but wisely held their tongues. Indeed, it is quite a welcome surprise to witness the return of the Uchiha clan to Konoha, Danzo remarked, prompting Naruto to narrow her eyes. Recently, she had been delving into various matters, particularly concerning Itachi. She had known him during her younger years, as he had once been assigned as one of her Anbu guards before the Uchiha massacre. She had always struggled to believe that he was capable of committing such atrocities, especially given that he had the opportunity to kill her on the day of the massacre but chose only to injure her. He had inflicted enough harm to incapacitate her, but knowing she was a Jinchuriki and an Uzumaki, he likely anticipated that she would survive what would have been fatal to most. She had not reflected on that night in some time. It was only recently, while assisting Tsunade and discreetly searching for information about the Uchiha massacre, that she came across some files left behind by the third Hokage before his death. These files were stored in a vault where he had kept some of her father's special kunai and a letter from her parents. She had known of its location because the third Hokage had shown her when she was younger, though she now wondered if that had been intentional. Needless to say, she was now aware of the reasons behind the Uchiha massacre. It made her cautious about placing her trust in Konoha to safeguard her family's well-being, considering that they were willing to decimate one of their most esteemed clans to the last member instead of exploring alternative solutions. Surely, not every Uchiha was involved, not all were even shinobi, and even among those, not all could have participated in any dissent. Some were mere Jonin or Chunin, with few being around Sasuke's age at the time, if she recalled correctly. I am confident, Naruto responded. There remains the question of your husband? Homura began. He is, after all, a missing nin. He was never officially listed in the bingo book or classified as a missing nin. His status was merely MIA, Homura, Tsunade interjected. Ah, but the question remains. He is still with Orochimaru, does he even know about his children? Danzo inquired. I have said it before, I believe Uchiha Sasuke to be a risk. He did betray the village in pursuit of power. That is irrelevant, Naruto interjected, her chin raised, addressing Danzo as though he were beneath her. He is my husband, and I assure you he will return before long. I expect his arrival any day now. As for his actions, apart from engaging me during the retrieval mission, he has done nothing more than desert Konoha. Even so, there is nothing to be done, aside from Tsunade exercising her right to discipline him as she deems appropriate upon his return. I fail to see your reasoning, Lady Uchiha, the head of the Akimichi clan, Choji's father, interjected. Despite your assurances, Uchiha Sasuke did leave the village for another and endangered his comrades in the process. That was not his intent. As for my reasoning, I believe you may have heard of a concept known as diplomatic immunity. At the council members' surprised expressions, she continued. My mother was the heiress to the Uzumaki clan. As some of you may know, the Uzumaki not only founded Uzushio-gakure but also resided on Uzu no Kuni for generations. They owned the island, and though there was no official daimyo at that time, the Uzumaki clan head was regarded as such. This was before daimyos became the norm for nations, As I am the last of the main house and my mother was once the heiress, until Uzumaki Mito requested her presence here, passing the title to one of my mother's sisters who perished in the destruction, I am the rightful heiress, and Uzu no Kuni belongs to me. As of last year, I am the first official daimyo of the Land of Whirlpools. I see, so the worst that could be done is suspension from the shinobi forces, and probation, Narashikaku said, smiling slightly. Very smart, Uchiha Uzumaki Dono. That was a new one, Naruto thought. Usually she was called Uchiha Dono or Narudono, though she wasn't really one for titles. Does that mean you plan to leave Konohagakure and the Land of Fire? Danzo asked, hiding his concern on the matter. He wasn't the only one who knew that if she left Konoha for Uzu no Kuni, which many knew had been under construction for nearly 4 years now, that they'd lose the Uchiha clan entirely. Not to mention powerful shinobi, as no one denied the fact Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke were powerful ninja. Naruto smirked slightly before shaking her head. You might or might not have heard that Uzu no Kuni had been under the process of construction and a bridge was finished that connects Uzu to Nami no Kuni, Naruto said. It still has some work to be done before it is inhabitable, and I am able to be the daimyo while remaining in Konoha. Unless my family feels threatened, we will remain here for the majority of the time, but we will eventually travel between the two frequently since I will have more duties in Uzu once it is home to people once more, and of course Uzushio is revived. It wasn't an answer to the question, per se, many realized, but put many people's fears to rest with the way she'd worded it. What the more intelligent realized was that it was very possible she and her family would relocate to Uzu no Kuni in the future. It was unheard of for a daimyo of another country to reside in a country other than the one they ruled. Yes, on the topic of Uchiha Sasuke, since he is the lord of Uzu no Kuni beside Naruto Dono, there is only so much that can be done for his crimes of leaving the village without permission, Tsunade began. I intend to place Uchiha Sasuke on 3-month suspension from anything above C rank, and on probation for 5 months. Circumstance will decide if his punishment will be lessened or worsened as time goes on. Depending on his behavior, he could be cleared completely within a few months. You agree with this, Uchiha Dono? Hiashi asked, eyebrow raised, the only emotion he gave away. Naruto smiled. I do not condone what my husband did nearly 4 years ago, Hiashi-sama, and I know many clan heirs were put in harm's way by his actions. He may not be thrilled with this, but I think it'll serve to deflate some of his ego. Lord knows it's too large for his own good, she said, making light of the situation. Some of the Shinobi Council, and even Civilian Council let out quiet chuckles. If that is all, I believe this meeting is over. Let us all convene for the evening. I after all still have the village to tell of Naruto's status and heritage, Tsunade said, and Naruto looked over at Tsunade. Tsunade-sama, if I may? Naruto began, surprising them at her manners. Many were used to her flippant attitude in dealing with Tsunade. Calling her Ba-chan for instance. I don't think we should tell the villagers quite yet my status as daimyo of Uzu no Kuni. No one knows who the new ruler is yet, and with Akatsuki, and me unaware if Sasuke has taken care of Orochimaru yet, I believe it's best to leave it unknown. I think Uchiha Dono is correct in this, Hokage-sama, Shikaku said. Agreed, Inuzu Katsume said. The rest of the council nodded, as did Tsunade. I see, it will be left out them. For Naruto and her family's safety. One more question, Homura began as everyone began to rise. What of Uchiha Sasuke? Do we know when he will arrive? No, Naruto answered, we have no contact right now. You must understand our time together over the last 4 years has been for only a week or 2 at a time, if that. Sasuke was allowed to come and go from sound as he pleased, but if he was gone too long there was no doubt Orochimaru would become suspicious. This became even more of a dangerous notion when the twins were born and later Menma. While he does hold the snake contract, we dare not use our summons to contact one another, especially not the snakes, in fear of something being leaked out or intercepted in some way. The last time I spoke to him was a month ago. Then how do you know he'll return soon? Inoiki asked. Because we've planned the death of Orochimaru down to the last detail. It wasn't easy either, but we knew there could be no mistakes. It wasn't just Sasuke's soul at risk, but his body and our family, Naruto said. If things went as planned, he's already killed Orochimaru. As for when he'll arrive? That depends on Sasuke. I do know it'll be within the next few days or the next few months. He gave me his word of that. And how is he to get into the village? A civilian asked. You seriously don't expect him to walk in during the middle of the day as if he owned the place? Naruto's smile grew into a mischievous, fox-like smirk grin hybrid. That's exactly what I expect, Councilman. November 5th. Land of Vegetables? The year after the twins turned one was probably even more hectic than the last, and it had a lot to do with the rigorous training Jiraiya had her doing. To make up for lost time, he said, which she'd thought she'd already been doing the first year of her children's life, though she had to evenly split the time as she was not going to neglect them even for training. The good thing about Naru was she learned quickly enough, especially when she used the cage Bunshine to its full capabilities. Of course she had to do everything that was a muscle memory herself, that included Fuinjutsu, at least the calligraphy of it. Recently, her training had decelerated, with the twins' second birthday quickly approaching. She had begun to suspect something, and if her suspicions were correct, it would indeed be a surprise, albeit not an unwelcome one. This development would slow her down for the next few months, but it would also provide ample time for theoretical studies and Fuinjutsu, which required minimal physical exertion, save for hand movements. Later, she would practice utilizing Fuinjutsu in combat. She knew it was feasible. Senju Uzumaki Mito was renowned for employing Fuinjutsu during battles. The challenge, however, lay in finding a practical method to do so. What are you contemplating, Dobi? An amused voice inquired as a hand gently combed through her long hair. She paused, setting aside her brush, and turned to smile at her boyfriend. It had been nearly 2 months since they last saw each other, and it was now early November. His stay this time was brief, just a few days, because he wanted to be with her and the twins for their second birthday. A few years ago, she couldn't have imagined Sasuke as a father, but now it seemed perfectly natural. He was a devoted father, even if his visits were limited to once every few months for a week or two, sometimes less. Nothing, she replied, biting her lip. She wasn't ready to reveal her suspicions until she was certain, and the only way to confirm them without arousing suspicion from Sasuke or Jiraiya was to consult Kurama, with whom she had been attempting to establish a rapport for the past 6 months. It was proving more challenging than anticipated, but then again, Kurama was a bijou lord and exceedingly stubborn. Sasuke appeared unconvinced but chose to let it go for the moment. Standing up, Naruto took his arm and gently guided him toward their bed. They were staying in a hotel in a village within the Land of Vegetables. Don't worry about it, Sasuke. I was just thinking about the twins' upcoming birthday. It's hard to believe they're almost 2, she said as she settled beside him on the bed. Sasuke smiled softly as the blonde rested her head on his chest, wrapping an arm around him as she lay at his side. He, too, was astonished by how quickly time had passed. It felt like only yesterday that the twins were born. Kissing the top of his girlfriend's head, he closed his eyes, and they both drifted into sleep. For Naruto, however, instead of dreaming, she found herself drawn into the seal, appearing in the familiar sewer. Kurama! She began, but the intense crimson eyes indicated that she need not have roused him. I have something I need to ask of you. Kurama stood as best he could, though his cage hadn't shrunk too much since the last time, so he still had considerable space. I know what you want, brat, he sneered. I was going to contact you if you hadn't shown up soon. I was beginning to think you were even more foolish than I initially thought. So I am. Pregnant? Kurama finished for her, resting his head on one of his clawed, hand-like paws. Congratulations. You just can't seem to resist populating the world with that cursed Sharingan. She rolled her eyes, sensing that something in Kurama's past made him resent the Sharingan and the Uchiha clan, especially Sasuke. Kurama had mentioned that Sasuke resembled an ancestor, Madara, so she assumed that was part of the reason for his animosity towards Sasuke. Do you know how far along I am? I have my suspicions, but you seem to be able to detect these things earlier, she said, and Kurama looked as though he nearly wanted to roll his eyes. You frustrate me, Kit, she heard him mutter before he spoke up. You're in the early stages of your 4th month, nearing the end of your 3rd. She was somewhat surprised, but not overly so. She hadn't experienced many symptoms during her pregnancy with the twins either. Morning sickness had been minimal, if it occurred at all, until halfway through her pregnancy. She hadn't started showing significantly until the end of the 4th month or beginning of the 6th month last time either. Fortunately, it's just one this time. I couldn't handle the cramped space if it were more again, the red fox grumbled. Now leave me. I wish to rest and forget my misfortune of having jailers. Naruto stifled a chuckle before departing, briefly waking up before slipping back into sleep. She would inform Sasuke in the morning, and then they would have to notify Jiraiya. That, she anticipated, would be quite entertaining. June 19th, present day. Kata Hagakure no Sato. She hadn't expected Sasuke to return right away, but she saw the way those closest to her acted as the days passed since the council meeting. It had only been a week, and she already knew Sasuke had accomplished his goal, and was simply tying up loose ends. He was also bringing a few people with him, one who was apparently related to her. He'd sent her a message with one of his new summons, a hawk, which had surprised her. She was aware that he wasn't particularly fond of his snake contract, as it linked him to a man he despised as much as he did his own brother. She hoped to resolve this issue once he returned and wished for him to take the revelations well. Recently, he had discovered a summoning contract in one of Orochimaru's libraries within his bases. She was not concerned, knowing he was capable of handling himself. She had spent the past week reintegrating into Konoha. She had encountered Iruka, who was so taken aback by the news of her and Sasuke that she thought he might have suffered a stroke or seizure upon visiting her the day after Tsunade's announcement. Iruka's reaction was one of disbelief, especially upon seeing her children. Menma was napping at the time. He had gone pale and stuttered his words. Iruka was somewhat like an overprotective father or elder sibling, sometimes even resembling a mother hen. Despite his small lecture on safe practices and the challenges of raising children as a shinobi, he did offer congratulations. As a shinobi in his late 20s, he understood that starting families earlier was not uncommon, though it was less prevalent in times of peace. His own parents had him when they were only 16. The Ichiraku family were among the first to learn about her family, much to Sasuke's chagrin, as her fondness for ramen had evidently been passed on to their children, although Menma was too young to fully appreciate it. It appeared she inherited this trait from her mother, who had also frequented Ichiraku's many years ago. She noticed that some villagers regarded her with newfound respect, with a few even bowing and referring to her as Lady Uchiha. Conversely, others regarded her with disdain, whispering about her supposedly seducing the last Uchiha to control him. She was not surprised by these comments and did her best to shield her twins, who might partially understand these rumors. She was not overly concerned, knowing that hostility was inevitable for someone who was the Kyuubi Jinchuriki or for other reasons. Naru Nichin. The young blonde paused in her approach to the Namikaze compound and turned to see 3 newly minted Jinan running toward her. She had not yet seen Konohamaru, Udon, or Moigi, as they had been occupied with D-rank missions, and she had kept a low profile during the first few weeks of her return until Tsunade's announcement. She had also heard they had completed their first C-rank mission shortly after her arrival. "Mama, who's that?" Kiyoshi asked, tugging on the hand he held. Nariko adjusted the skirt of her dark blue dress, which was similar in style to the dress her mother wore off-duty or during pregnancy, though with some modifications. Her dress had long slits up both sides, and she wore short black shorts underneath for readiness in combat. Menma was secured in a sling, playing with strands of her bright hair. Naru greeted the Jinan with a bright smile. Though older now, they still wore similar outfits. Konohamaru had kept his red scarf, but his goggles and helmet had been replaced by the Konoha Hitai 8. "Konohamaru, how are you?" she inquired as Konohamaru, breathing heavily, stopped in front of her. It's true," Moigi panted, glancing from the twins to Menma. "Ah, I suppose you haven't been introduced yet. Konohamaru, Udon, Moigi, these are my children, Kiyoshi, Nariko, and Menma." "Hi," Kiyoshi mumbled, hiding behind his mother's leg. Nariko, more outgoing, waved with a fox-like grin, a clear inheritance from her mother. The whisker marks on her cheeks enhanced the effect. Moigi squealed softly, bending down slightly to greet them, as she was only about 4 feet 8 inches tall. "It's a pleasure to meet you both. You resemble your mother so much," Moigi said, trailing off as her teammates processed that the rumors were indeed true. The small family had been in Konoha for just over a month, and they marveled at how they had missed it despite their busy schedules. Naruto chuckled lightly and smiled. She supposed Nariko and Menma might take after her a little more than Sasuke in some areas. Nariko's slightly tamer hair, eye shape and color, as well as her softer, rounder facial shape obviously came from her, along with the birthmarks. "I guess they do, though I think the twins look a bit more like their father than me," she stated, though she was sure the same couldn't be said for Menma. He already looked too much like her, just male, with Sasuke's black hair, and no birthmarks. The twins smiled in what could almost be called smug pride of this. They adored their father, especially Nariko, who was a bit of a daddy's girl. She was a little sad about that at first, but she got past it, especially when Kiyoshi turned out to be a bit of a mama's boy. She'd heard that there was bound to be one in every family, but she'd never put much stock in it, thinking it a bit cliché. She'd never had parents to get attached to though, she wasn't able to judge the whole thing. "You're right about that," Udon said, wiping his nose with his sleeve. "They do resemble Uchiha-san." Konohamaru stared, not with a glare, but with a thoughtful expression as if he were deep in contemplation. After a moment, he sighed, scuffing his feet in the dirt and shoving his hands into his pockets. "Darn, I suppose that means I lost to him," he muttered, then added with a pout, "and I was really going to elevate my game." Naru blinked, tilting her head slightly in confusion. Moigi giggled behind her hand, and Udon chuckled softly. "Kono-kun had a crush on you, boss," Moigi said with a smirk, glancing over at her teammate in a manner reminiscent of Sakura, though the only similarity was their unusual hair colors. "You should have seen his reaction when Tsunade announced to the village that you married Uchiha Sasuke." Konohamaru's face turned a deeper shade of red as he looked away from the blonde, who blinked and chuckled softly, offering a gentle smile. "I had no idea. You're a good kid, Kono-kun. I'm sure you'll find someone new to admire," she said, ruffling his spiky brown hair with her free hand. Kiyoshi was now holding onto the skirt of her dress instead of her hand. Konohamaru managed a half-hearted smile and nodded. He hadn't realistically expected Naru to reciprocate his feelings. He was only 12, and he subconsciously understood it was merely a crush, but he wasn't interested in coming between Uchiha and his spouse. He had heard stories about Uchihas being provoked, such as the exaggerated tale of Uchiha Izuna, who had burned part of the forest surrounding their clan's compound when his brother, Uchiha Madara, took his dango. While the story might have been embellished over time, Konohamaru wasn't willing to risk it. Sasuke's demeanor, particularly his cold eyes and the fact that he had never smiled during their encounters, intimidated him. "Naru-nichan, may I hold the baby?" Moigi asked, gazing up at the taller woman with wide eyes. "Just be careful and make sure to support him properly." Naruto began, leaning down to show Moigi the correct way to hold Menma, who was curiously observing his surroundings. Moigi gazed in awe at the dark-haired child. Upon closer inspection, it was clear that Menma resembled his mother. His eyes were slightly narrower than hers, but his black hair was a clear trait from his father, and his bright, electric irises were undoubtedly inherited from his mother. "He's adorable," Moigi murmured. "He looks just like you, boss." Udon and Konohamaru nodded in agreement, recognizing how much Menma resembled Naru even at such a young age. "Mama, are we still having barbecue with your friends?" Nariko asked, tugging at her skirt. "Oh, right. I apologize, but I need to get home and prepare the children for their meeting with the Rookie 9 today." If you'd like, you can join us for the meal, Naruto replied, taking Menma back from Moegi. Thanks, boss, but we have training with Ebisu-sensei in an hour, Udon explained, with Moegi and Konohamaru nodding in agreement despite their disappointment. Naruto and the twins bid farewell to the three Genin and proceeded on their way. For the last time, Karen, I am not interested, the annoyed raven-haired teenager snapped. Karen, a flirtatious girl of similar age but perhaps a year younger, with shoulder-length red hair and striking red eyes concealed behind purple-framed glasses, pouted slightly as she was pushed off his arm. Despite her persistence, Sasuke found her somewhat reminiscent of his wife in certain features. Though Karen had a similar facial shape and build, and her red hair was a natural highlight to Naruto's blonde, they were fundamentally different. The resemblance was intriguing given that they were distant cousins, which was not uncommon. Karen's behavior was almost more intense than Sakura's during her fangirl phase, driven by a mixture of hero worship and attraction. Sasuke remembered her from the Chunin exams, though he hadn't paid much attention to her name or details when he had saved her, as her distinctive red hair had left a lasting impression. A lot like how Naruto's golden locks that looked a bit like a sunset with their natural red highlights were unforgettable. Unique only to her as far as he'd ever seen. He'd have to break Karen of her fantasy though, or let Naru do it, and something told him that wouldn't be a good idea. The idea of the two Uzumaki women, two of the very last of their clan, made him want to shudder at the damage they could cause, collateral or otherwise. Karen, while primarily a scientist and medic with strong sensory abilities, was not particularly skilled in combat. Sasuke anticipated that if a conflict arose, his wife would likely have her cousin hospitalized within moments. It was imperative to address the situation promptly. "You're wasting your time, pressing yourself against him inappropriately, Karen," Suigetsu remarked with a smirk. "He has someone in Konoha who he would prefer to be with." Karen's face flushed with anger as she quickly turned to confront the white-haired boy. "What did you just say to me?" she demanded, her voice raised. "You heard me," Suigetsu replied dismissively. "Ugh, just leave, you annoying water user," Karen retorted. Sasuke sighed with relief, grateful to avoid yet another attempt by Karen to gain his attention. Despite only traveling together for 2 days, Karen had not missed an opportunity to seek his notice in a manner reminiscent of eager admirers. "Enough," Sasuke intervened, stopping Karen's assault on Suigetsu, who continued to evade her blows with ease. "Cease this behavior, or I will be forced to take action." Hugo observed the interactions among his new companions with a mixture of indifference and mild relief. Karen and Suigetsu ceased their quarrel and turned to face Sasuke, who looked at them with a bored expression. "Karen, Suigetsu's comments are accurate. I am married," Sasuke stated, displaying the chain with his wedding band for clarity. He had intended to wait until returning to Konoha to address the Hokage's response regarding his return and defection before wearing the ring openly. He regretted not mentioning his marital status to Karen earlier but had been preoccupied with other matters, such as reuniting with his family and devising a strategy for dealing with Itachi. Karen's face went pale, and her glasses nearly slipped off her nose. "Am married?" she stammered in shock. Sasuke simply grunted and continued on his way, passing the three of them. Hugo shrugged, feeling a sense of relief that Sasuke had someone in his life. It indicated that Sasuke was not as indifferent as he might appear, given his commitment to his wife and unwillingness to entertain Karen's advances. Hugo acknowledged that some men, regardless of marital status, might still be susceptible to seduction, but he noted Karen's loud and aggressive demeanor. Suigetsu laughed at Karen's dismayed reaction before following the others. Karen, regaining her composure, adjusted her glasses and sighed. She had not anticipated discovering that her hero was married, especially given their young age. Although it was not uncommon for individuals to marry young, she had not considered Sasuke's potential marital status given his years with Orochimaru. His wife was evidently not affiliated with Orochimaru's faction, suggesting she was someone Sasuke knew prior to or during his time away. With a shake of her head and a resolve to reassess her feelings, Karen hurried to catch up with Sasuke and his companions. Naru meticulously smoothed down Menma's hair, or what little he had, but it stubbornly refused to cooperate, much like Kiyoshi's. It reminded her of her own short hair as a child, which had a mind of its own. One reason she preferred keeping her hair long was that it remained mostly straight, similar to her mother's when it was long. After abandoning the effort with Menma's raven-colored hair, she adjusted the dark orange onesie he wore. It featured a spiral design on the front and an Uchiha fan on the back. Kiyoshi and Naruko stood with barely concealed impatience, shifting from foot to foot. Kiyoshi wore a high-collared black shirt adorned with the Uchiha fan on the back and a white Uzumaki swirl on the right shoulder, reminiscent of her previous orange and blue jacket. He paired it with dark blue shorts and shinobi sandals. His hair, although brushed, had a tendency to stick up in the back, resembling a duck's tail, with bangs framing his face in a manner distinct from Sasuke's. As he grew older, Naru noted how his hairstyle seemed to blend traits of both Sasuke's and her own father's. Naruko wore a high-collared top with sleeves that flared slightly past her elbows. The purple top featured the same white spiral on the right shoulder and Uchiha fan on the back. She paired it with black capris and shinobi sandals. Aware that this was an informal gathering, she had chosen to compromise on the attire. Naru herself wore casual attire, a dark green cheongsam top paired with a black skirt that reached just below her knees. Although she wore her shinobi shoes, she had replaced them with a pair of sandals similar to those worn by Hinata. With Menma's diaper bag and her purse slung over one shoulder, she picked up Menma and turned to the twins. "Are you two ready?" she asked. They nodded eagerly, relieved to move. "All right, let's go. Remember to stay close to me." Kiyoshi and Naruko nodded in agreement as the four of them departed from the house and made their way to the nearby barbecue restaurant. The venue was just a 5-minute walk from the compound. Upon entering, they quickly located the other members of the Rookie Nine seated at one of the largest tables in the establishment. Fortunately, this barbecue restaurant was managed by Choji's family, which facilitated their entry without any issues. Choza, Choji's father, had been anticipating their arrival. "Remarkable, they do resemble the brooding Avenger," Kiba remarked as one of the first to notice them. Kiyoshi and Naruko were uncertain about Kiba's remark but understood it was directed at them and likely their father, whom many claimed they resembled. Displeased by the negative reference to their father, they cast a stern look at Kiba, causing him to flinch. "Even their glare is reminiscent of him," Kiba muttered, with Akamaru barking in agreement. Naru shot a frosty glare at Kiba. "Please refrain from using inappropriate language in front of my children, Kiba." Her smile, while sweet, was more intimidating than her glare, signaling how motherhood had refined her demeanor in unexpected ways. "I believe she picked that up from Iruka-sensei," Sakura commented, eliciting laughter from the group, including Naruto. "It's wonderful to see you again, Kyo-chan, Nari-chan." The twins responded with bright smiles, their seats situated next to Sakura and their mother. Adjacent to their mother's side was a high chair where Menma was seated. The girls around the table couldn't help but express their admiration for the infant's striking black hair and blue eyes. "You have delightful children, Naru," Tenten complimented, smiling warmly. "I suppose they inherited that from their mother," Kiba joked, chuckling. "How is Sasuke doing?" Naruto sighed, aware of Kiba's lingering resentment towards Sasuke following the events of the rescue mission when Sasuke defected. Kiba, one of her oldest friends, had harbored feelings for her until the Chunin exams led him towards Hinata, who had admired him for some time. Naru had never reciprocated Kiba's feelings, making it easier for her to play matchmaker. She was pleased to see that Kiba and Hinata had grown closer. "He is well. He contacted me to inform that he will be returning in a day or two," she responded. "I expect him to arrive any time now." "Today?" Sakura inquired, her voice filled with hope. "He's truly coming back?" Ino asked, her disbelief evident despite having moved on from her infatuation with Sasuke years ago. Naruto smiled and nodded. "He is indeed." "Excuse me, Uchiha-sama," an unfamiliar voice interrupted, drawing the group's attention from their meal. An Onbu operative, masked to resemble a feline creature, addressed her. Yes. The Hokage has requested your presence, along with Haruno Sakura, at her office. It is urgent. Naruto, momentarily surprised, glanced at her children before nodding. She would need to find someone trustworthy to look after them, and help arrive swiftly in the form of a man approximately 5 feet 10 inches tall, with short white hair featuring silver highlights and piercing red eyes. Oh, Masahiro, she said, slightly startled by his sudden appearance. Thank you for coming. Masahiro, her third guard and the most protective yet loyal of her security detail, had always been a reassuring presence. His clan valued loyalty and family, principles Naruto deeply respected. Lady Uchiha, Masahiro greeted. I will escort the children back to the compound, if that is acceptable. We will ensure their safety. His formal and reserved demeanor, coupled with his aversion to public settings, made him a good match for Sasuke, who similarly preferred solitude. Very well, Naru agreed, gently lifting Menma from his high chair and handing him over to Masahiro. The twins appeared to understand that they might not see their mother for a day or two, or possibly even longer. Although this was disheartening for them, as they had rarely been apart from her for more than a few hours, they comprehended that her responsibilities sometimes necessitated her absence. Their parents had provided an explanation about why their father did not live with them in a manner that they could mostly grasp. While they did not fully understand the complexities involved, they were aware of the situation enough to make sense of it. With a sigh, yet confident in her three guards' ability to protect Kyoshi, Nariko, and Menma, Naruto turned to Sakura. The two exchanged farewells with the others before departing. As they made their way to the Hokage's office, they noticed a commotion in the streets. Both Sakura and Naruto shared concerned glances but chose not to inquire, continuing on their path. Upon reaching the Hokage's office, Sakura knocked on the door, and they entered to find Kakashi already present. Naruto, Sakura, I'm glad you're here, Tsunade began, her expression serious as she clasped her hands together. What I have to tell you is troubling. I have received alarming news from Sunagakure. Akatsuki is on the move and has captured the Kazekage, Sabaku no Gaara. What? Naruto exclaimed, her eyes widening as she clenched her fist at her side. Gaara is not exactly an easy opponent. Besides, they were on his home turf, Suna, which is predominantly sand. He should have had the upper hand. Kakashi and Sakura exchanged surprised glances. They had always known Naruto to be more perceptive than she appeared during her early days as a Genin, but it was evident she had matured significantly over the past 4 years. Indeed, but Gaara also had to prioritize the protection of his village over his own safety, as is the duty of a Kage, Tsunade remarked with a weary sigh. It did not help that the adversary in question was renowned for his use of explosives. We have to assist him, Sakura declared with resolve. If Suna is in danger. That is precisely why you have been summoned, Tsunade continued. I have assigned a mission to Team 7. You are to proceed to Suna immediately and rescue the Kazekage. Upon arriving in Konoha, the experience felt almost surreal. The guards at the front gate were so taken aback by his presence that they did not react as he walked through the gates and into the village. They simply stared, seemingly speechless. He was quite surprised that no one attempted to detain him or his team. The villagers merely paused to gape as if they had seen a ghost. Soon, the entire village was abuzz with commotion. His first destination was the Namikaze compound, where he found the main residence, his father-in-law's childhood home. The compound resembled the Uchiha estate but on a smaller scale, with an abundance of wildlife. Wow, is this where you live? Karen inquired, speaking for one of the first times since learning of his marital status. Indeed, this is my wife's clan compound, he explained. Specifically, her father's side of the family. Karen's demeanor grew somber as she recalled his previous mention of knowing some of her extended family. He had recently revealed that his wife was the very clan head he had spoken of, Uzumaki Naruto, or Uchiha Naruto following her marriage. Sasuke was only mildly surprised to find that the children and Naru were not at home. She might have taken them out, possibly to meet friends, though he was uncertain if they would still consider him a friend after his defection. He observed his companions exploring the area, with Karen examining the latest photographs alongside older ones of his wife's maternal and paternal relatives. He approached the collection of pictures, noting that the most recent ones featured him and his family. The older images depicted his wife's grandparents, a couple with red hair matching that of their children, including the oldest, whom he recognized as his mother-in-law. Another photograph featured a sunny-haired man with green eyes and a lilac-haired woman with blue eyes, similar to their son and granddaughter. "She is beautiful," Karen commented, holding up a picture of him, Naru, and their 3 children. It was taken shortly after Menma's birth, with Naru in the hospital bed, Menma in her arms, and the twins gazing at their new brother. Sasuke smiled faintly and nodded. "I know," he said before turning towards the exit. "Remain here until I return. Mamoru will stay with you and inform Naru and the others about your presence upon their return." Suigetsu, Karen, and Hugo exchanged puzzled looks. "Who is Mamoru?" Suigetsu asked, just as a man emerged from the shadows. Even Karen, with her keen sensory abilities, was taken aback. His red hair, similar to her own, suggested a connection to the Uzumaki clan. Sasuke had mentioned another Uzumaki aside from his wife, which might explain how he evaded her sensory detection. "I am," the man said, introducing himself. "I am Yukimura Uzumaki Mamoru, one of the Nanatsu Uzu Gadianzu, 7 Whirlpool Guardians." "Ah," he mentioned that they were rebuilding Uzu, Karen remarked, smiling at her distant relative. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mamoru. I am Karen Uzumaki." Introducing herself as Uzumaki, Karen felt somewhat surreal. She had not used her last name since before her parents' deaths and her arrival in Kusagakure as an orphan. The name had been a painful reminder of her isolation. Now, knowing she was not as alone as she once thought, she did not mind using it. "I will guide you to an available house within the compound. It may require some cleaning, as it has been unoccupied for over a decade." Suigetsu, Karen, and Hugo nodded and followed him to one of the better preserved houses in the compound. "Ah, so the Akatsuki is finally making their move." Everyone in the room turned almost simultaneously as Naru, with a pleased expression, observed the dark-eyed man kneeling at the smaller window in the office. Once inside, he was warmly embraced by his wife and pink-haired teammate. His anticipation of this reception allowed him to remain upright. "Sasuke, you're back," Sakura murmured, smiling as she rested her head against his shoulder. However, the small smile of genuine happiness Sasuke had while seeing Sakura was soon replaced with a look of discomfort as she withdrew from the embrace and, pulling Naru with her, landed a punch to his abdomen. "You, utter scoundrel!" she exclaimed, withdrawing her fist as Naru sighed, resigned to Sakura's volatile temperament. Despite her irritation, it was evident that she had not employed much of her chakra-enhanced strength. The barely visible smirk on Kakashi's face and the quiet laughter Tsunade struggled to suppress indicated their amusement at the unfolding scene. "Well, it's pleasant to see you too, Sakura," Sasuke said, straightening up while rubbing the area she had struck. "Ahem, as enjoyable as this reunion is, we must address more pressing matters," Tsunade reminded them. Naru nodded, her demeanor becoming serious. "Indeed, Gaara," she said. "We should depart immediately. Suna is a 3-day journey unless we maintain a rapid, non-stop pace." "Yes, you 3 should proceed. The Uchiha will remain here and face his, regrettably mild, reprimand," Tsunade said, causing Sasuke's normally stoic expression to twitch. Naru mentioned this. "But can it be postponed? I believe that rescuing the Kazekage warrants an exception, and you did assign Team 7. As far as I know, I am still a member of Team 7, Hokage-sama." "You defected, you forfeited your position," Tsunade countered, causing Sasuke to narrow his eyes. "I am unaware of any such regulation. Once assigned to a cell, the only time one ceases to be part of it is upon promotion to Chunin. I was never promoted, and even if I had been, Jinan teams typically remain together even after promotion, according to Konoha's historical precedent." Tsunade, realizing she was running out of arguments, glanced at Naruto, who stood by his side, skillfully ignoring the fact that Sasuke was subtly playing with strands of her long hair. Tsunade rolled her eyes and sighed in exasperation. "Very well, you have prevailed this time," she conceded. "No one has seen you yet. No one of importance, at least. If asked, I'll claim you invoked your clan head privileges." Naruto chuckled, noting that the Hokage was now mostly muttering to herself, clearly reluctant to concede to Sasuke. Sasuke, smirking, was indifferent to the Hokage's remarks, pleased to have achieved his objective. "Are you all right, Tsunade-sama?" Sakura inquired, and the Hokage nodded, retrieving a hidden emergency stash of sake, carefully concealed from Shizune, who was known for removing her alcohol. "Just go, the Kazekage won't rescue himself," she said, pouring sake into a saucer. "I need a drink." She didn't even notice as the reunited Team 7 left her office. Thank you for your attention. Please subscribe to my channel for more content. Thank you. Anime Octopus.